Today, that is July 11th, marks World Population Day, designated to raise awareness about issues related to the globe's population. That being said, on this edition of Issues and Insiders, we address Korea's demographic decline and the current countermeasures against it as its fertility rate plunged to 0.72 last year. The OECD average was 1.58 in 2021. Welcome to Issues and Insiders for this Thursday, July 11th. I'm Min Sunhee. South Korea may not be unique in its witnessing of falling birth rates, but as pundits assert, it stands alone with regard to the severity of the situation. For more on this, I have Doctor Willem Adema at the OECD Social Policy Department. Dr. Adema, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Choi Hyunsun at Myongji University live on the line as well. Professor Choi, it's great to have you on.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Right, Dr. Adema, speaking within your capacity as a researcher looking into the situation here in South Korea from the outside, how severe is the country's demographic decline?
Well, as your introductory visual made it very clear, South Korea has a lower fertility rate than any other country in the OECD. The estimated fertility rate is 0.65 for 24, and the OECD average is 1.51 for 22. So it's less than half, which just indicates how big the problem is. The issues are related to women having births later. And in Korea, that is well above the OECD average again. I mean, the mean age of women at first childbirth is almost 33 years of age, whereas for the OECD, it is just above 29 years of age. Korea is not the worst in terms of childlessness among women. But it's catching up with countries like Japan and Spain and Italy, where a quarter of the women who were born in 1975 have no children. The implication of this is that it contributes to a rapid rise in the demographic ratio of old age people over 65, to the working age population, people 15 or 20 to 64. Across the OECD, that will increase from 30% sort of now to 60% in 2060. In Korea, it will increase from 25% now to almost a one-on-one in 2060. And that could hurt living standards. It puts pressure on the younger generation to finance social protection supports. So it will be increasingly important and critically important to increase the employment rate among groups which are currently underrepresented in the labor market, such as women and young people. And it will be important to increase productivity and make better use of technology than you already are doing, and develop a very coherent immigration strategy.
Right. And before we touch upon the efforts to tackle this low birth rate and an aging society, Professor Choi, findings for the month of April showed a slight increase on year, that is, of 2.8% in the number of newborns. How do you respond, Professor Choi? Are we looking at a shift in trend, or is this a one-time phenomenon?
Oh, it sounds great, but not yet. Maybe it could be because of the base effect in the April in the last year, or is a tentative or the temporary effect or the result. So in the last year, the April, we had the lowest, very low, the number of the newborn babies, which means this year, April, we can be just a normal number according to our 12 months, but probably base effect is much lower. It looks like increase, or we can have a very tentative temporary increase with a certain event. We could more investigate, but probably we must observe maybe patiently about in the May and June and July. We could have some kind of trend is going up. We really hit the bottom, and we could be another rise. We don't know yet, but I really be not that optimistic, because some kind of policy impact on, and it would at least take 2 years to make more newborn babies, or we have increased the birth rate. The policy impact would take at least 2 years. So I don't think that we had any big efforts yet. So probably this April, the surprise probably is just a little snack, but not yet the right track.
Right. On a more tangible effort then, Dr. Adema, the government here, the Korean government for its part, is setting up a ministry to tackle the low birth rate and the aging society. Do you suppose the government then is moving in the right direction with the setup of this ministry, Dr. Adema?
Well, the decline in the fertility rate over the past decades is related to many different factors: employment situation of men and women, the cost of housing, the cost of education, public supports that are available for people to have children and support them. Changes in attitudes, changes in perceived risks, financial risks to household. In short, a whole gamut of factors that affect fertility trends. That means that there is also a whole range of measures that you could use to address the various issues. And from that perspective, it makes a certain amount of sense to strengthen coherence in your policy package. And one could do that by bringing together the responsibilities for a range of these measures together in one ministry or one agency. That would help or could help. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, of course. The better coherent strategies among central government, but also in cooperation with local governments. But what will be very important is to bring in the social partners, the employers, the unions, because a key barrier to having children in Korea lies in the labor market and the workplace cultures. And to do something about that, you need employers and unions on board.
Right, for sure then. Before we touch upon that particular reality then, Professor Choi, broadly speaking, the Korean government for now is placing priority on 3 factors. They include work-life balance, support for education and childcare, as well as family planning and housing. What factor, Professor Choi, do you suppose is of utmost importance as we speak then?
Yes, I think that those 3 factors are more important for the maybe parents and then our future birth rate. But those factors may be depending on the status of a parent or the future parent. So I mean, is parents who have already children. Probably education is the most important and the most urgent issue among them, and then also maybe the work and life balance, and then maybe company and then maybe public institution surely make them more comfortable to raise their children, care their children. That's the maybe main issue. So I say education is the utmost important for the parents. But our future maybe parent or recently married but who doesn't have the babies and children yet, we government may be more focused on the support about their housing and their planning for the family planning. That is the most important because there are different steps. So I think that I'm really maybe disappointed while government say this and that we make more and more, but they never find out who really needs that. Okay, so they must maybe segmented about their parent groups and then the future parent group and then the unmarried population. Yeah, probably that's maybe we need. Yeah.
Right, I see. Dr. Adema, earlier this year, France, alarmed by the lowest birth rate in some 30 years, I believe, at 1.68 for last year, announced a major reform to its parental leave system. Having said this, and very generally speaking, Dr. Adema, do you suppose greater parental leave support will encourage couples to have children?
Well, the French situation is interesting because their leave supports was, in terms of duration, not at all bad, but the payment rate was rather low in international comparison. So many people didn't use it. And that's the driver of the reform plans is to make more people, more mothers, but also more fathers use that particular support provision, parental leave. Now, in international context and based on the research we've done, and when we do economic regressions on a cross OECD basis, we find that parental leave as part of the overall support package for families, which also includes childcare support or education support, that has a positive effect on fertility rates. But the effects based on national surveys can differ a bit on context. So what you've seen is that parental leave reform in Germany, for example, have led to an increase in fertility among the higher educated women. The same thing applies to countries like Sweden and Iceland, where both men and women use it, and where a more gendered division, more equally gendered division of care responsibilities contributes to higher fertility rates. In some OECD countries, this doesn't work yet like that. And Korea seems to be one of those countries. The evidence there is, for example, with regard to fathers taking leave, is that when fathers do take leave, they may actually be less likely to have a second child compared to those fathers who haven't taken leave yet. So the evidence is in negative in that sense. But Korea is different in the sense that a lot of mothers and even more fathers are hesitant to take leave because they feel that this will overburden their colleagues. And this is one of the issues in the workplace culture that has to change so that people actually make full use of the supports that are available to them.
And speaking about the workplace, Dr. Adema, and going back to a point that you raised earlier, what structural changes need to be made within the labour market to ensure greater birth rates going forward?
Well, in Korea, you have a very divided labour market with a strong dichotomy between regular workers with generally good employment conditions and non-regular workers who are paid far less. And what you've seen over the past decades is that the group of non-regular workers among young people has increased from 32% in 2003, to just over 41% in 2022. And the wage gap, the gap in earnings between non-regular workers and regular workers has increased to a ratio of almost 2 to 1. So that doesn't help young people who are on these non-regular contracts with addressing the costs of having children. Apart from that, as I already pointed to, Korean workers still feel hesitant about taking leave because they feel that this might overburden their colleagues. So one thing to do is for larger employers, at least, to start thinking about replacement workers so that people will actually make full use of their entitlements and in the knowledge that their colleagues won't be overburdened. Then there is the long working hours issues, the large commutes, more flexibility in start and finishing hours will also be important, and give that control to workers rather than employers determining the setup. So there's a whole range of measures in the labor market, in the workplace culture, that can change to make the combination of work and family commitments better.
Right. Professor Choi, aside from the challenges posed by the workplace environment as mentioned by Dr. Adema, what are the other potential, perhaps, hurdles to government efforts to boost birth rates here in Korea?
I think the government need. I think Dr. Adena really gave us really good points, which our policy and policymakers should include in the low birth rate policy. I think that we don't have any agreement about among the government and the laborers and the unions and the civil society and we don't have any agreement. Only the government to keep talking about and announce about the emergency, whatever, but they never ask people about this. So the problem we have in the last 20 years, we had spent more than 200 trillion won for this low birth rate issue, but the result and performance was nothing, all the worth, which means we must accept a failure about our past trajectory. So, but still, our government and the bureaucracy and politics keep following the way and trajectory about the old and the failed policy steps, so which is very bad. So I think as Dr. Adema explained a lot about the case of the Europe and the France, I think that we need agreement about in our society. Also, really good pointed about maybe especially young generation. A considerable portion of their young generation work in the non-regular work. So which means our policy should change or make a big innovation to follow the social change, but we didn't make anything. So I think it's just a big hurdle how we can make our government change the first, and then we can provide better policy. Then we have maybe better or maybe higher birth rate.
Right. And expanding on what Professor Choi has just said, Dr. Adema, since the year 2006, the Korean government has injected roughly $250 billion in trying to boost its birth rates. That being said, Dr. Adema, what can be done to ensure that financial assistance translates to policy successes?
Well, one of the key things with this type of support is that people have to trust that this type of support will also be available in 20 years' time. So the people have to trust that the work-life balance support that has been made available will be there, and then they will act upon it. So it takes a bit of time before a system of support is developed and people react to it. Short-term, temporary cash inflows, baby bonuses, they may not work because people believe that they might not be there for a long time, and it may just affect the timing of births. The other thing which is very important is, right, what will you spend your money on? And in terms of Korea, the cost of education are an important barrier to having more children. Koreans are more likely, for example, than Japanese to have children, but then they stick to one or two because the cost of education prevents them from having another one. In Japan, the childlessness rate is much higher, but once parents do have children, they are more likely to have 2 or 3 children. The other key issue, so education support, very important. More investment in public education may well reduce the outlays on Hagwon and private education. The important issue which has come to the fore in many OECD countries, and not just in Korea, is housing cost. But the sad issue is that 80% of Koreans in the age group 20 to 29 still live in the parental home. That is similar to Italy. And of course, that situation is not conducive to having children. So the support should be geared towards addressing those issues, education and housing.
Right, and housing and education is some of the measures that the government has touched upon in its efforts, has pledged to touch upon in its efforts to best boost birth rates here in the country. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this discussion. Dr. Adema, thank you so much for your time. And Professor Choi, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time on Friday.